Hello, my name is Clea, and my parents broke into the building I built, stood in the lobby like they owned it, and demanded I pay them back for raising me. They told the world I owed them for 23 years of food, clothes, and silence. Then they erased my name, called me ungrateful, and said I was never their daughter to begin with. But the worst part? It wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't the cameras. It was the fact that for a moment, I almost believed them. What kind of parents sue their own child for surviving them? I was early. Not because I was eager, just cautious. When you've spent your whole life being forgotten, you learn to show up before they can pretend they didn't see you coming. The air outside the building was damp, Oregon's usual mist clinging to everything. My hand hovered over the brass handle of Legacy Tower, my tower, and yet something made me hesitate. The concrete didn't feel like victory today. It felt borrowed. Like someone else had just walked out of my life wearing my clothes and claiming my voice. Inside the lobby, the lights glowed warm and soft, intended to feel inviting, comforting. Instead, the sight of dozens of chairs neatly lined up, floral centerpieces on cocktail tables, and a table stacked with printed brochures made my stomach clench. I stepped in, tugging the sleeve of my blazer lower. I'd gone simple tonight, gray slacks, clean lines, no lipstick. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want them to say, "Oh, look who had to prove something." A man in a catering vest turned toward me and gestured at the pizza boxes on a cart behind him. "You the delivery? Just roll it to the back by the buffet." It took me a second, then another, and then, without a word, I rolled the cart forward. I could have corrected him, could have said, "Actually, I built this place." But what for? People don't believe things that sound too far from what they've already decided. I paused as I caught sight of the banner hanging across the far wall, celebrating our legacy, a tribute to the Cargill family. My last name was Donner. But Cargill, my father's name, still clung to me like ash. There it was, embroidered in gold. I hadn't been told this was tonight's event. Nobody had asked for my input. Hell, nobody had even asked permission to use the space. The sound of soft jazz hummed under low voices and clinking glasses. As I moved past the entryway, I heard someone say, "You must be so proud of your son, Avon." My breath caught. I looked up, and there he was, Avon Cargill. My younger brother, slick in a navy blazer, hands shoved casually into his pockets like he owned the air people breathed in here. And standing beside him, smiling for the camera like a homecoming queen, was my mother, Vera. And next to her, expressionless but unmistakably present, was Russell. I froze. My heartbeat wasn't racing. It had stopped entirely. Vera laughed lightly, speaking to the local anchor from Channel 6. "We always raised our children to serve. This building is just a natural extension of our family's values." I scanned the room. The donor wall that I had spent hours planning was covered in framed photos of people who had inspired the project. My face wasn't among them. Neither was my name in the brochures stacked by the door. I wasn't the daughter who built this. I was a stranger watching her life get repackaged. I tried to find the event coordinator, Darla, the woman I had trusted with my schedule. She avoided eye contact, glancing down at her clipboard when I stepped forward. "Avon's got everything under control," she muttered quickly before disappearing into the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, unmoving. I could have raised my voice. I could have demanded space. But instead, I walked toward Avon. He saw me. Of course he did. His smile widened, but it wasn't warm. "Clea," he said, with that fake surprise in his voice, "didn't think you'd come tonight." "I didn't know I was invited." He shrugged. "It's not personal. It's just branding. People know Dad's name, the family name. Well, you've always kind of been on your own track, haven't you?" I said nothing. I didn't blink. And that silence, it made him uncomfortable. He looked away first. I turned and walked out, not stormed, not stomped. I just walked, slow and quiet, like the air was thick and dragging behind me. On my way out, I passed the bronze plaque on the outer wall, the one I'd paid for, chosen, approved, Legacy Tower. I ran my finger across the bottom edge and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "It's funny how much legacy costs when they never paid a damn cent." The streets outside were colder than before, or maybe I was just noticing it now. I reached into my coat pocket for my keys and realized my hands were shaking. I didn't drive straight home. I needed air, needed distance. I sat in my car for a while, engine off, lights dimmed. Then, eventually, I pulled out of the lot and drove the 15 minutes back to my apartment complex across town. The building was smaller, more modest, but it was mine, purchased before I ever broke ground on legacy. Inside, the walls greeted me like they always did. Silent, neutral, safe. I walked straight to my bedroom, kicked off my shoes without untying them, and dropped into the desk chair. The drawer on the bottom right hadn't been opened in years. The key was tucked into the lining of my wallet. I hadn't looked inside it since I moved here. But tonight, I did. Inside was a photo. Torn. One half showed a young girl in pigtails holding a cardboard trophy. The other half, gone, had once held Vera's face, I think. Or maybe Russell's. I couldn't remember anymore. I wasn't sure I wanted to. My phone lit up on the nightstand. A notification. Cargill family, honored for community vision at Legacy Tower opening. Tag, @CleeDonner. I stared at it, not moving, not breathing, and just like that, I knew. They weren't done. They were just getting started. I hadn't even gotten out of my robe when I found it. Slipped under my door, perfectly centered like it was placed with intention. A manila envelope, crisp and clean. There was no return address, but the heavy seal in the corner said enough. Clackamas County Courthouse. I stood there barefoot on the cold tile, staring at it like it might explode. It already had, just not in a way you could see. I bent down and picked it up, slowly. My fingers ran over the weight of the envelope. Legal paper always feels heavier, doesn't it? It carries more than ink. It carries decisions, accusations, power. Inside, 3 pages, neatly stapled, no wasted words. The first thing that caught my eye was the amount, $187,000. The next thing, the names at the top, Russell Cargill and Vera Blythe, plaintiffs, and then mine, Clea Donner, defendant. The rest of the words didn't matter, not really. They were just legal jargon arranged in a way that made betrayal look polite. Cold language like parental restitution, breach of moral obligation, and failure to provide repayment for services rendered. I scanned the paragraph again and again until the phrase burned into my brain. As repayment for housing, food, clothing, and schooling provided over 23 years. Services rendered. Like I was a transaction that defaulted. A bill they'd been waiting years to collect on. And now they wanted interest. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 15. The world outside hadn't changed, but mine had cracked a little more. Eventually, I pulled myself together and got dressed. I called Thomas, my lawyer. He'd known my family since I was a teenager, knew more than most. When I told him what had come, he told me to meet him at his office in an hour. I said I'd bring coffee. It gave me something to do with my hands. By the time I walked into his downtown office, the rain had started again. Portland's way of making sure you never get too comfortable. I handed him the latte and sat down without a word. He opened the envelope and started reading. 2 minutes in, he looked up. "Clea, this isn't a lawsuit. It's a stunt." I raised my eyebrows. "They filed it through the courthouse, didn't they?" He nodded. "They did. But this? They're twisting a minor clause from an old inheritance statute. It's something that was meant for dependent elder care, not this." I sat back. "So, it's legal?" He paused. "Technically, it has standing, but it won't hold." That "but" always ruins everything. He flipped to the 3rd page and froze, then pushed it across the desk toward me. "Read that signature," he said. I did. My mother's name, scrawled in elegant loops and sharp hooks, Vera Blythe. And above it, a paragraph that made my throat go dry. "Our daughter, though born of us, is no longer part of our household. Her moral duties, however, remain unpaid." I couldn't speak, couldn't even blink. I looked at Thomas, waiting for him to say something wise, something comforting, but all he said was, "They want to humiliate you, not win." I nodded. He wasn't wrong. They never wanted peace. They wanted power. Afterward, I walked to a nearby cafe. It was one of those places that still wrote your name in chalk on your to-go cup. I didn't feel like going home yet. My hands were still shaking, and my brain was caught in a loop of memories and imagined headlines. That's when it happened. A man stepped in with a mail carrier's jacket, holding a small white envelope. He looked around, unsure, then caught sight of me. He smiled. "Oh, hey, you're Clea, right?" "Sorry, I think I put this in your box by mistake last week. I found it in my back tray just now. Meant to bring it sooner." I took it, confused. "Thanks." He left. I turned the envelope over. No label, just a wax seal. My mother's handwriting. I knew it instantly. Inside was a wedding invitation. White linen paper, gold script. The kind of thing meant to impress people who already thought too highly of themselves. At the top, Mr. and Mrs. Russell Cargill request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Isolde Blythe. I stared at the name. Isolde, my sister. Not a word to me, not a text, not a call, just a wrongfully delivered envelope that should have never reached me. Tucked inside, a smaller folded note. Vera's handwriting again. "Don't show up. Let this day be about real family." I don't remember leaving the cafe. I just know I ended up back home, soaked from rain I hadn't noticed, the envelope still in my hand, now smudged with moisture and fingerprints. I placed the wedding invitation and the lawsuit side by side on my dining table. For a long time, I just stood there, looking at them. They sat like relics from a life I hadn't asked for and couldn't return. Part of me wanted to burn them, watch them curl into nothing, let the ashes mean something. But another part of me knew better. I opened a drawer in the hallway credenza and pulled out a folder. The label on the front had been written years ago, back when I thought distance might protect me. Their final chapter. I placed both documents inside, shut the folder, and slid it back into the drawer. Then I turned off the lights and sat on the floor beside my window, letting the city buzz around me in distant hums. The storm hadn't passed, it had just announced itself. I hadn't even made it to the kitchen for coffee when my phone buzzed with a news alert. I ignored it at first. I was still carrying the weight of the lawsuit, the wedding invitation, the note from Vera calling me not real family. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. I was wrong. By the time I'd poured the coffee and taken my first sip, the buzzing hadn't stopped. More alerts, emails, social media notifications, one after another. Reluctantly, I picked up my phone and tapped into the feed. There it was. A full-page article, top of the fold in the Portland Review, Portland's next legacy builder, Avon Cargill. The photo was unmistakable. My building, my vision, legacy tower. Avon stood in front of it, arms crossed, smiling wide. The headline was in bold, above his head like a crown. The quote underneath read, "Our son Avon has always been the heart behind this project," said Vera Blythe. "We raised him to build things that last. Legacy Tower is just the beginning." I sat down on the edge of the couch and just stared. My name wasn't mentioned once, not in the article, not in the photo caption, not even in the sidebar listing key contributors. I wasn't just being pushed aside, I was being replaced. The voice in my head started whispering old things, useless, too much trouble, not the golden one. I tried to steady my breathing. I told myself it was just spin, just more of Vera's social charades, but it didn't work. I left the house without brushing my hair. I walked to the cafe 3 blocks away, hoping the air would settle my nerves. It didn't. The cafe was quiet, mostly regulars. I slid into a booth in the corner, ordered a black coffee, and sat with the folded newspaper someone had left on the counter. The article looked worse in print. My name was missing like I'd never existed. The woman next to me at the next booth leaned over casually. "That's your building, right?" I looked up. She wasn't being mean, just curious. "I thought so," she said, tapping the page. "Funny how family works." That word again. Family. I didn't respond. I just smiled politely and folded the paper in half. When I got home, I turned on my laptop. I needed to see it for myself, needed to understand the depth of the betrayal. The online version of the article had already gone viral. Comments were pouring in. "Didn't the youngest run off and get arrested once? Looks like the golden boy stepped up. Gotta love a family legacy." My inbox was worse. Messages from donors. Former collaborators. One subject line read, "Should we redirect our support to Avon's Foundation?" I clicked on the link someone had forwarded me. Avon had launched a new initiative, conveniently titled Cargill Community Housing, with the tagline, "Continuing the legacy of compassion my family built." I stared at the screen for a long time. Compassion. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I closed the browser and shut the laptop. Then I sat at the table again, the same spot where I'd placed the lawsuit and the invitation. All 3 pieces of paper now sat in a triangle: lawsuit, wedding invite, newspaper. 3 nails, 1 coffin. I took a deep breath and stood up. I paced. I cleaned dishes that weren't dirty. I pulled clothes from the closet and refolded them. I couldn't sit still. My body was trying to run from a memory before it even arrived. It caught me anyway. Later that evening, after I'd finally stopped pacing, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, no message, just a link. Normally, I would have deleted it. But something told me to click. The video was grainy, old. Looked like it had been filmed on a phone that barely held a charge. The setting was familiar, the old kitchen from the house I grew up in, the kitchen where birthdays were celebrated with dry cake and forced smiles. In the video, I was 13, hair in a ponytail, arms crossed, visibly shaking. I stood in the cornered between the fridge and the counter. Russell was yelling, "You don't talk to your mother like that." I said something inaudible. Then a sharp sound, flesh against skin. I flinched watching it, even now. He slapped me across the face. Not once, twice, hard. Vera's voice rang out from behind the camera. "This is what you get for disrespect." I watched myself, 13-year-old Clea, raise my arm to shield my face, only to turn and pull someone smaller behind me, Zinnia. I had forgotten she was even there that night. I'd taken the blows for her. The screen froze on that image, me standing between them. I closed the laptop like it was radioactive. My chest heaved. I was on my knees without knowing how I got there. My hands were fists. I hadn't made fists like that since I was a kid. All the years I'd tried to forget, compressed into one blurry clip sent by a stranger. Maybe not a stranger. Maybe someone who knew exactly what this would do. But whoever they were, they'd forced the truth back into the light. I stood up, slowly. My legs felt like paper. I walked to the window and stared out at the street below. It was late, maybe after midnight. Portland was quiet at this hour. Streetlights buzzed like white noise. I grabbed my phone, typed one sentence, sent it to Thomas. "Let's go public, all of it. No more hiding, no more silence." They wanted to play the legacy game. They were about to find out what happens when you erase the wrong name. I didn't sleep the night the video resurfaced. My body rested, but my mind kept cycling through every word, every scream, every raised hand that had shaped my childhood. By morning, I hadn't moved from the couch. I'd sent the text to Thomas about going public and then just waited. I didn't expect anything from them after that. What else was left to pull? Then my voicemail blinked. The audio clicked on, and Zinnia's voice came through, thin and trembling. "Mom's in the hospital. They're saying it's her heart. She's asking for you." There was a pause. I could hear her swallow. She said, "She wants to make things right." I didn't know what surprised me more, that Vera had admitted needing me, or that she'd chosen Zinnia to carry the message. For a second, less than that really, something in me softened. It wasn't love. It wasn't forgiveness. But guilt is a powerful tool, and my mother had always known how to sharpen it. I spent the next hour in silence, pacing the apartment, staring at my phone. My rational brain kept replaying the last few weeks, the lawsuit, the erasure, the lies. But something deeper, something old, was whispering. What if it's real? What if she's really dying? It wasn't love pulling me toward the hospital. It was the haunting feeling that if I didn't go, they'd use my absence to paint me as the heartless one. So I showered, dressed, and drove across town to St. Augustine. The hospital's automatic doors whooshed open like they had all the answers, but I knew better. Hospitals were just buildings, no more honest than the people inside them. I gave the front desk my name. The nurse nodded and directed me to room 312. I recognized Russell the moment I stepped off the elevator. He stood near the vending machine at the end of the hallway, arms crossed, pretending he wasn't watching the door. His eyes met mine for a second, just long enough for him to register my presence. Then he turned his back. I pushed open the door to 312. It was too quiet inside. Vera lay on the bed, pale under the fluorescent lighting, an oxygen mask strapped to her face. Her hair was neat, too neat. Her nails were painted. The TV was on mute, playing a cooking show. She looked up and saw me. "There she is," she rasped, pulling the mask away. Her voice was thin, but not frail. "I knew you'd come. You always had a kind heart." I didn't move from the doorway. Russell stepped in behind me, but didn't say a word. "I just want to talk," she said. "Sit, please." I walked in, carefully, like I was stepping into a stage I didn't agree to perform on. My bag stayed on my shoulder. I kept my coat on. "I don't have long," I said flatly. She nodded like she understood. "That's okay. I wanted to see you, after everything." "After the article." "After the lawsuit?" Her eyes welled up instantly. "I didn't know they'd twist the article like that. And the lawsuit, your father—" I cut her off. "Don't." The door opened again. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped in, carrying a leather briefcase. His smile was polite, neutral. "Miss Donner," he greeted me. "I'm Philip Lang, legal representative for your mother." I turned toward Vera. "You called me here to talk, not to negotiate." "It's not what you think," she said, voice cracking. "It's just some paperwork, to clarify a few things, make amends." Philip opened the briefcase and pulled out a neatly bound agreement. "This is a voluntary statement," he said, "in which you agree to provide ongoing familial support in recognition of the years of care and upbringing provided by Mrs. Blythe. The document is symbolic. It has no enforceable legal power unless you wish to honor it." I stared at him, then back at her. She looked so small on that bed, so still. "I don't have much time left," she said, pressing the back of her hand to her forehead. "I just need to know you don't hate me." I didn't respond. I walked toward the bed. My shoes were soundless on the floor. Philip extended a pen. Vera reached for my hand. "Please, Clea, just sign it. I want peace between us." I took the pen slowly. I walked over to the table, flipped to the last page, and stared at the signature line. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a yellow sticky note. I wrote my name in clean block letters, peeled it from the pad, and stuck it on top of the signature line. "This is all you'll ever get from me," I said. Vera opened her mouth, but I didn't stay to hear whatever came out. I walked out. Past Russell, who refused to look at me, past the nurse's station, past the vending machines. In the parking lot, I finally exhaled. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't joy. It was clarity. They weren't just trying to guilt me. They were trying to trap me. One last legal trick, one final manipulation wrapped in a dying woman's act. And I didn't fall for it. Not this time. I woke up the next morning expecting silence. Instead, I found my name trending, for all the wrong reasons. The local paper had covered the hearing before it even happened. Their morning edition ran with the headline, "Former Cargill Patriarch Denies Paternity in Shocking Courtroom Twist." Beneath it, a photo of Russell exiting the courthouse, looking solemn and proud, like he'd just buried something with dignity. Buried me. The hearing didn't start until 11, but I arrived early. I sat alone in the corridor, dressed in black slacks and a gray blouse, hair pulled tight. Neutral, calm, non-threatening. The same way I'd dressed for every parent-teacher conference, every job interview, every awkward family dinner. The way women dress when we know we're about to be discredited. The bailiff called my name. I walked into the courtroom and immediately felt the heat of eyes. Journalists, local bloggers, maybe a neighbor or two who'd followed the headlines. Russell was already seated at the plaintiff's table, his posture military stiff. Vera sat beside him, wrapped in a beige shawl like she'd just crawled out of hospice. She wasn't even subtle anymore. Thomas, my attorney, leaned toward me. "You ready?" Does it matter? I whispered. He didn't answer. We both knew the truth. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then we began. After the procedural rundown, the judge looked at Russell and asked the standard question. Please confirm your relationship to the defendant. Russell didn't even flinch. She's not my daughter. No hesitation. No pause. The room gasped. Vera covered her mouth, feigning shock, like it hadn't been discussed over tea and lemon bars 2 days earlier. The judge blinked once, slowly. Are you saying you are not the biological father of Miss Van Clee Donner? I raised her, Russell replied coolly. But she's not blood. She doesn't carry the Cargill name. She never will. My breath caught. Not because I didn't see it coming, but because it still pierced like glass. The judge asked for clarification. Thomas objected. The room buzzed. People whispered. But all I could focus on was the silence from the gallery. My siblings sat 3 rows back. Isolde stared straight ahead, expression unreadable. Avon was typing something on his phone. Zinnia wasn't there. Maybe that was her form of protest. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. I didn't look at Vera. I didn't need to. After a few more statements, the judge paused the hearing to review pending materials and granted both sides a recess until the following week. The damage, though, had already been done. Later that night, back at home, I checked my mailbox like I was on autopilot. Tucked between a utility bill and a real estate flyer was a thick envelope with my name in faded ink. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Aunt Lorna. I hadn't heard from her in years. She was my mother's younger sister, the one who used to send me books wrapped in brown paper when I was a kid, the one who stopped showing up after one too many fights with Vera at Thanksgiving. I brought the envelope inside, set it on the table, and stared at it. It felt heavy. Inside, there was a letter and a small USB stick. Clea, I watched the hearing on television. I'm sorry. I should have spoken up a long time ago. You probably don't remember that summer you stayed with me. You were 9. Your mother told people you were just visiting, but she hadn't wanted you in the house. You were scared all the time, jumped at every sound. I didn't say anything then because I thought I was protecting you. I see now I was protecting them. You deserve to know what happened. This recording was from the old neighborhood. Vera was talking to a neighbor. I don't know if she knew I was in the next room, but I had left the tape deck running. I never destroyed it. Maybe part of me always knew you'd need it someday. I'm sorry I didn't get it to you sooner. Lorna. My hands trembled slightly as I plugged the USB into my laptop. The audio crackled for a few seconds, then Vera's voice filled the room. If someone offers to take Clea and pay, maybe we should let them. She's too much. Always crying, always staring at me like I'm the villain. What are we supposed to do, raise a girl like that and expect her to turn out normal? There was silence. Then another voice, faint, female. A neighbor, I think. You'd really consider letting someone take her? Vera laughed, sharp and joyless. Don't pretend like people haven't done worse. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up working the streets. You know how girls like her turn out. The audio ended with the click of a door shutting. I sat there, still, the laptop glowing in the dark. It wasn't just that she said it. It was how casual it sounded, like I was an inconvenience she could trade, like a car with a bad transmission. I closed the laptop. My heart wasn't broken anymore. It was quiet, focused. I opened a new email to Thomas, attached the audio file, then typed, "Let's show them what family really looks like." And hit send. The message from Thomas was waiting in my inbox the next morning. He'd already heard from Vera's lawyer. A settlement proposal. Neatly typed, professionally phrased, tied with a verbal ribbon like it was a gift. A quiet agreement, no more headlines, no court. They always did this. Start fires and then ask if I'd mind holding the hose, quietly of course, so no one had to look at the smoke. I replied in one line. They dragged me into this court. I'll finish it here. And I meant it. For the next 3 days, Thomas and I worked non-stop. He organized documents, filed motions, annotated every legal reference in the affidavit Aunt Lorna had sent. I reviewed old receipts, cross-referenced statements, and sat through hours of deposition prep. Not because I wanted to relive any of it,
but because I knew what was coming. They weren't going to lie flat. They never did. The hearing took place on a Monday.
Portland was gray and wet, but something about the air felt clearer that morning, as if the city itself wanted this finished. The courthouse was full. Reporters with cameras waited by the steps. The gallery inside buzzed with whispers as Thomas and I took our seats. Russell and Vera sat at the opposite table. She wore pearls and a pale pink blouse. Her eyes were glassy, her smile gentle, until I looked at her. Then it vanished. The judge entered and called the session to order. We began. Thomas moved quickly. He played the audio Lorna had provided without flinching. Vera's voice, raw and undeniable, filled the courtroom. If someone offers to take Clea and pay, maybe we should let them. She's too much. The room went still. Even the court stenographer paused for a beat. Next came Lorna's affidavit, confirming the date, the location, her presence, and the authenticity of the recording. Thomas followed with a breakdown of the lawsuit, how it leveraged outdated codes, how it contradicted previous family financial records, and how it was clearly motivated by Clea's recent success and not any genuine legal merit. Russell never once looked up. Vera fidgeted with her necklace, eyes darting toward the press section. The judge asked if the plaintiffs had a counter-argument. Their attorney stood up, cleared his throat, and mumbled something about family misunderstandings, the complexity of memory, and emotional interpretation. The judge cut him off gently. I've heard enough. And then it came. Quiet. Final. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The court finds no legal basis for the plaintiff's claims. Furthermore, the court orders all legal fees incurred by the defendant to be paid in full by the plaintiffs. Vera let out a soft gasp. Russell stood up too fast and hit the edge of the table with his hip, grimacing but saying nothing. And me? I didn't move. I let it sink in slowly, this moment that didn't come with applause or confetti, but with justice. Quiet, grounded, and absolute. Outside, the press was waiting. They swarmed as I stepped through the doors, microphones angled upward, voices overlapping. Clea, do you have a comment on your parents' claim? Is this the end of the Legacy Tower controversy? Do you feel vindicated? I didn't dodge. I didn't hide. I stepped forward, eyes steady. This isn't just my story, I said. It's for every child turned enemy just for surviving. It's for every person who outgrew the cage they were born in. I didn't take questions. I didn't need to. Behind me, Vera slumped onto a bench near the front steps. Her face was blotchy, makeup smudged. No one turned a camera her way. Russell stood to the side, arms crossed, face stone, a statue watching the end of his own era. That evening, I sat at home in the small dining nook by the window. The city lights blinked in patterns I'd grown used to. Yellow, red, pause, green. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, Letter Not Sent. Dear Mom, no, Vera. You always taught me names, matter, titles, appearances. You said grace came from poise, and poise came from control. I watched you control everything around you, every word, every photo, every lie. But you never learned to control me. You called me ungrateful, said I owed you for every crumb, every roof, every moment. You called me a debt to be repaid. But I wasn't alone. I was your child. And then I wasn't. You made sure of that. You'll probably never read this. And that's fine. It's not for you. It's for me. To remind myself that silence isn't the same as peace. That walking away wasn't weakness. It was survival. That you don't get to rewrite me out just because you never liked the story. I closed the document. Then I printed it, folded the paper, and burned it in a dish on the balcony. I watched the ash rise into the spinning blades of the ceiling fan above me. Sometimes closure doesn't come from conversation. Sometimes it's just the fire. It was late on a Thursday evening, 4 days after the ruling, and Legacy Tower was wrapped in the kind of hush only certain buildings know how to hold. The kind of stillness that comes after the last email has been sent, after the hallways have emptied, after the city quiets just enough to remind you it's still breathing somewhere beyond the glass and stone. Legacy Tower had its own rhythm after dark. It was subtle, almost reverent. Residents retreating into their apartments, conversations muffled behind thick doors, the lobby lighting dimmed to a warm golden hue that spilled softly across the marble floor. The city outside still moved, but in here, it felt distant, contained, managed. I was in my office on the mezzanine level, sleeves rolled, sorting through maintenance reports with the kind of focus that only comes from deliberate distraction. A leaking pipe on the third floor, a dryer that rattled like a warning bell, an elevator panel that needed rewiring. Ordinary problems, manageable ones, tangible in a way that human failure rarely is. I liked the ordinary, the smallness of it. This tower wasn't just concrete and contracts, it was lived in, held together by routine and people who believed in showing up. That mattered to me more than any court ruling ever could. Then the buzzer rang, sharp, abrupt. The sound cracked through the stillness like lightning through glass. I froze for a moment, pen in midair, eyes fixed on the blinking line on my office phone. It was a direct line from the front desk. Jason's number. I picked up. "Miss Donner," Jason said, calm as ever. "Someone's forced the front lock. Elderly female, unarmed. We've alerted the police." I didn't ask who it was. I already knew. I rose from my chair, smoothed my blazer, and walked to the elevator in silence. No panic, no rush. My heels clicked softly against the polished floor, the echo familiar. By the time I reached the lobby, the front doors were ajar, glass edges gleaming faintly under the chandelier. And she was there, standing dead center beneath the light like some scene painted by memory. Vera, barefoot, her gray hair unbrushed, wild in a way I'd never seen before. Her cardigan sagged off one shoulder. In one hand, she clutched a rolled-up piece of paper, frayed at the edges, aged like something kept too long. Her other hand curled into a fist, shaking slightly at her side. She turned as she heard the click of my steps. "There you are," she spat, eyes burning. "You think you've won?" I stopped a few feet away, shoulders steady. "You shouldn't be here." She took a half step forward, raising the paper like a weapon made of memory. "This was mine," she shrieked. "I fed you. I washed your clothes. I held your hand when you sobbed over that useless boy in 9th grade. Her voice cracked on the last word, too loud for the hour, too bitter for the silence. "You think this is yours?" she hissed, her face blotchy with rage. "This building? This name? You're nothing without us." She was trembling. Her fury didn't feel sharp anymore. It felt hollow, spent. This wasn't the poised woman who had crafted narratives in courtrooms and holiday tables. This was someone unraveling. The performance was gone, and in its absence, there was just the damage. I didn't respond. Above, I heard the soft shuffle of balcony doors opening. A few residents, alerted by the noise, had stepped outside. Mrs. Lacey from 4A, her small dog clutched to her chest. A young couple on the 3rd floor, arms folded, watching. No one said anything. Then Vera turned in a slow, almost theatrical circle and held up the paper in her hand. A drawing, and I recognized it. A crayon sketch I'd made when I was maybe 6 or 7. A stick figure girl standing in front of a towering building. At the top, written in crooked red letters, "My house someday." She held it like it was proof. "I kept this. I saved this," she sobbed. "Doesn't that count for something?" Still, I said nothing. Outside, the faint wail of approaching sirens rose in the air. 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing blue and red against the glass facade. Jason approached the officers, holding a printed incident report. He kept his voice low, respectful. "She broke the lock. Surveillance caught it." The officers approached Vera slowly, calmly. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just stood there as one of them gently removed the paper from her hand. They spoke to her in soft, practiced tones. Her arms moved behind her back, and the click of handcuffs echoed like punctuation in the empty lobby. As they led her past me, she turned. "This is what you do to your own mother?" she whispered, broken but biting. I finally spoke. "No," I said. "This is what happens when you confuse control with love." She blinked. For a moment, I thought she might say something more, but she didn't. They guided her out the doors. One by one,
The residents returned to their apartments. No one asked me what had happened. They didn't need to. I could feel the shift in the air. Not judgment, not pity, but understanding. The kind of understanding that doesn't need to be explained. I stood there for a moment longer, letting the silence wash over me. Then I turned toward the front desk. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a control panel. I opened it, pressed the small remote, and listened as a quiet motor activated. A metal shade lifted slowly, revealing the plaque behind the reception counter. Brushed steel, backlit softly. The name I'd chosen. The Youngest's Legacy. Beneath it, another plaque, smaller, but centered. Permanent Clea Donner. I stared at it, not to admire it, to recognize it, to remember that despite everything, every erasure, every manipulation, every attempt to reduce me, I had stood back up and built, I had endured, and then created. And now, this building, this name, this peace, it was mine, not as a rebellion, as a reclamation. I stood alone in the empty lobby, the scent of fresh varnish still faint in the air. The night was quiet again. Outside, the city had returned to its rhythm. I whispered, not to the room, but to the girl who once drew a future no one believed in. I made it. Without you. There was no anger in it, just truth. Simple, final. I turned, walked toward the elevator, and didn't look back. I barely slept that night, but for once, it wasn't because of fear. It was focus. There was something sharp and steady inside me now, like a thread finally pulled straight after years of knots. The press was already camped outside Legacy Tower by the time I arrived the next morning. Vans with satellite dishes, reporters with cameras and coffee, curious residents watching from balconies with arms crossed and eyes alert. I walked through the main entrance without acknowledging the noise. Jason, our daytime security guy, nodded silently and opened the conference hall for me. I'd requested it unlocked at 8 a.m. Sharp. At 8:03, the room was already half full. By 8:10, it was standing room only. The community press hall inside Legacy wasn't fancy. It was meant for town hall-style meetings, for residents to talk about trash pickups or community gardening. But today, the podium in the center carried something heavier. I stepped up to it and looked out over the crowd, reporters, tenants, a few officials. I recognized a city council member near the back. I didn't recognize most of the others, and that made it easier. I adjusted the microphone slightly. "I've been silent long enough," I began, my voice low but steady. "Let me introduce myself properly." I paused, not for dramatic effect, but to breathe. "My name is Clea Donner, and this, Legacy Tower, was built by me, not my parents, not my brother, me." A ripple went through the crowd. I paid for it with my own savings. I planned it from scratch. I fought zoning boards and contractors and permits. I filed every form. I met with every family who now lives here. I've donated meals. I've cleaned toilets. And I did all of it without my family's help. I reached into my folder and pulled out a single page. Here is a list of tenants who have lived in Legacy since it opened. Some have moved on. Some have stayed. These are people who, like me, were told they didn't belong somewhere, who were told to shrink, to stay quiet, to be grateful for crumbs. I let the paper fall back into the folder. You've all heard their version of the story. Let me tell you mine. I didn't read from notes. I didn't need to. I told them about being 13, shoved in corners, silenced. I told them about working 2 jobs while still sending home money, thinking it might buy peace. I told them about Aunt Lorna's couch, about never receiving a birthday call, not even when I bought my first house. Then I played the audio recording. Vera's voice echoed through the room. "If someone offers to take Clea and pay, maybe we should let them. She's too much." No one spoke. No one moved. The silence that followed was louder than any applause could have been. I turned off the recording. "They didn't want a daughter," I said. "They wanted someone to blame, to use, to rewrite." I stood straighter. I built something from nothing. I was nothing to them, but I chose to become something for others. It was the first time in weeks I felt taller than my pain. When I looked up, a few people in the front row had tears in their eyes. One reporter had stopped writing altogether, her pen hovering mid-air. I continued, quieter now. But this isn't just about my story. It's about what we choose to do next. I unveiled a poster board covered in deep navy fabric. With a small tug, I revealed the logo of a new initiative, Legacy of the Unseen. Below the name were 3 pillars: scholarship fund, transitional housing, and mentorship. This program will support young adults who have been pushed out by their families, kids who aged out of foster care, LGBTQ youth forced onto the street, survivors of domestic trauma who need a place to restart. I didn't wait for applause. I wasn't here to perform. I stepped back from the podium and opened the floor for questions, not from the press, but from the people in the seats, the ones without press badges, the ones who lived here. A few hands raised. I answered questions about application deadlines, support structures, funding sources. Then, as I was about to step down, a voice came from the very back. It was soft but clear. "Thank you," the girl said. She couldn't have been older than 17. I thought I was alone. I didn't smile because it was expected. I smiled because, for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. The sun was already warming the east side of Legacy Tower when I stepped out onto the balcony just after 8. My coffee steamed gently in the cool morning air, the scent rising with it like a soft kind of ceremony. Below, Portland stirred to life with that familiar rhythm, steady, hushed, quietly efficient. Delivery trucks rumbled down side streets. A man in a neon jacket whistled while unlocking his bike. Joggers passed along the waterfront, breath visible in the crisp light, already rounding their second lap. I didn't feel triumphant. That wasn't the right word. What I felt was quieter than that. Something closer to relief, but deeper. Like the ache of an old wound that no longer hurt, but still caught your attention now and then, just enough to remind you what you'd lived through. The press had long since stopped calling. The story, if it ever really was a story, had done what stories tend to do. It exploded, rippled, and then folded back into the fabric of daily life. It ran its course through headlines and hashtags, triggering opinion columns and a few podcast pitches I declined without hesitation. Eventually, it faded into the background, just another tile in the mosaic of the city's collective memory. But they hadn't disappeared entirely, not completely. Vera and Russell still lingered in the edges of things, like old smoke. A week after my speech, while I was in the middle of reviewing a lease application for a new resident, security buzzed the intercom in my office. "Miss Donner? You may want to come down to the lobby." I assumed it was another donation drop-off or someone from a visiting agency who'd gotten turned around. I grabbed my blazer and headed downstairs. But when I stepped into the lobby, I saw them, standing just outside the glass entrance. Vera and Russell. They looked smaller, older, as if time had compressed them. Vera clutched a worn Bible to her chest like it was armor. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the windows, scanning for something. Recognition, maybe? Forgiveness, possibly. Russell stood stiffly beside her, deep in conversation with a resident from 2C. He was explaining something, gesturing broadly. She nodded politely, then slipped away, her eyes meeting mine for a split second before she vanished into the elevator. One of the desk staff, bless her, approached them with a mix of tact and resolve. "I'm sorry, this isn't a public facility. You're not listed as residents or authorized guests." Russell looked up at the building, his expression brittle with something unspoken. "We just wanted to talk to our daughter." The desk clerk shook her head gently. "She's unavailable." They didn't argue. They didn't yell or plead. They just left, quietly. I watched from the second-floor window, just above the lobby doors. Neither of them looked up, and I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the need to run down and demand answers or offer explanations. I didn't feel anything urgent or undone, just the stillness that follows when a long, fraying thread finally snaps. It wasn't joy that washed over me, but it was closure. Later that afternoon, I took a walk through the community garden out back. Something I tried to do at least twice a week. A kind of ritual, a reminder that not all growth announces itself with noise. The koi pond shimmered under the early spring sun. The air smelled like loamy earth and daffodils. A boy from 1A waved at me enthusiastically, his small hands coated in soil. His mother offered a grateful smile from the nearby bench. "Miss Clea," he called out, "we saw you on TV." I crouched down next to him. "Was it boring?" He shook his head, eyes wide. "You looked like a hero." The word caught me off guard. Hero. I didn't know how to respond, so I bumped fists with him and kept walking. In the far corner of the garden, tucked just under the pergola, I stopped. There it was. A rose bush. Young, tentative, its leaves new and still uncertain. It had been 3 weeks since I tore up the letter. The one I'd written to Vera and Russell. Not to send, but to say everything I knew I'd never get the space to say aloud. "You didn't break me," I had written. "You sharpened me. And now I plant what you never could." I had folded the letter with care. Each rip felt deliberate, like shedding something I no longer needed to carry. I buried the pieces in that patch of soil, fingers pressed into the earth like a prayer. Now, small green shoots had emerged. Nothing dramatic, just the beginning. But it was enough. I crouched again and brushed my fingers through the dirt near the base. It was still damp from last night's rain, still solid, still holding. I stood, brushed the soil from my knees, and turned toward the building. The steel nameplate caught the light just right. The youngest's legacy. The name no longer felt bitter, not like it had when I first proposed it, not like a rebuttal or a challenge, but as a truth reclaimed. People read it differently now, not as defiance, not as a declaration of resentment, but as a reminder that sometimes the one pushed furthest away ends up being the one who clears the path forward, for others, even if not for herself. And that was enough. I didn't need to rehash the past, not in interviews, not in op-eds, not in whispered retellings over dinner tables. No one needed to be reminded what they did to me anymore, because now they could see what I built instead. This wasn't just a story about a lawsuit, or a betrayal, or a family's unraveling. This was a story about voice. About truth, spoken without apology. About a woman who stopped asking for permission and started writing her own ending. And who one morning, with the sun rising over a city that once forgot her name, stepped out onto a balcony and remembered exactly who she was. Sometimes, the ones who should protect us are the first to betray us. But healing doesn't mean letting them back in. It means choosing who you become without them. Have you ever had to walk away from your own family to protect your peace? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful family stories that remind us survival is strength.